Sweet promises given to all who believe. Behold, I come quickly, mine own to receive. Hold fast till I come, the danger is great. Sleep not as do others, be watchful and wait. Hold fast till I come.
The last message to the messenger of the church in Laodicea, Revelation chapter 3, verses 14 to 22, historical setting. Laodicea means people judge, was founded in 261 BC by Antiochus II for his wife Laodice. Laodice later on poisoned his husband. It was located 45 miles southeast of Philadelphia. It was populated with Syrians and Jews brought from Babylon, and the Jews control the marketplaces. And that is what we find in the city. The city was very rich. It became one of the most attractive commercial and financial centers, hence a very wealthy city. Commercial activities went on there, and many people trooped in there and did business, and the city was wealthy because of the commercial activities. It was known for its first-class clothing industry, fine wool, banking sector. People brought their gold to keep, they had a bank there that people brought their gold and other precious stones to keep. They had good medical school, and they produced medicine to treat eye problems, and they used Phrygian powder and oil together to produce this medicine. This city was so rich that it rejected financial assistance from Rome to rebuild its city after a devastating earthquake in AD 60. The city relied on the spring water from Hierapolis, which became distasteful upon reaching Laodicea. The city did not have good water. It relied on water that traveled from a city called Hierapolis. The water was a spring water. It was hot when it came out of the rocks, but when it traveled to Laodicea, it became lukewarm because of the travel. And so it was difficult to drink. This is a pipeline that was constructed to transport water from Hierapolis to Laodicea. The water became lukewarm. You couldn't drink it. Let's look at the message. Jesus described himself as Amen, faithful, witness. What this simply means is that his assessment is true. His assessment of the church is true, and that he is a creator of everything. The city had gold. The city had, good medicine for treating eye problems. The city produced fine woolen cloth. So it had everything. So Jesus introduced himself as the creator of everything. What this means is that I created all the things that you pride yourself in. That's what Jesus is doing. And now Jesus used the imagery known to the Laodiceans to paint their distasteful spiritual bankruptcy. Your situation is worse. You think that you have gold and so you are rich, but you are not. Your situation is lukewarm. It's just like your water. It's not tasty at all. You are spiritually bankrupt. You don't have anything. You are only showing off. Your show is only outward. There's no content. Your spirituality has no content. It's only just to please people. You don't have any spirituality at all. You produce eye salve. You produce medicine to treat eye problem. But the truth is that you are blind, and I can give you the best medicine spiritually. So you can see things and see yourself very well that you lack. At the same time, you are naked. But you think because you produce fine woolen clothing, therefore you are well covered. But the truth is that you are naked. You don't know your situation. In other words, you are not conscious of who you are. You really are. you are deceiving yourself. Self-deception is your problem. You really don't know who you really are at this moment, and that I can provide the solution. Remember this, that this church did not receive any congratulatory message from Jesus. Only rebuke. Now, Jesus beckons the church to deny itself, seek true spirituality, and intentionally have close relationship with him to order his path. Jesus will let the overcomer sit on the throne of his Father, signifying eternal life and highest honor. Of all the 7 churches, only the church in Laodicea received this promise that the overcomer will sit with Jesus. The church that did not receive any goodwill message, no congratulatory message, no appreciation, that church received a promise that shows how close Jesus wanted to be with the church, and that he was ready. Jesus gave to the church in Laodicea. Now, let's look at the contemporary relevance of the section that we have dealt with, Living the Gospel, chapters 1 to 3 of the book of Revelation. Note here that the messages had historical significance to the 7 churches because Jesus addressed things which are. The 7 messages were addressed to the 7 churches in the Roman province of Asia. Why? Because Revelation chapter 1 verse 19 says, address things which are happening in the 7 churches. So the issues were not futuristic issues that were present. And that's why we are saying the messages had historical significance to the 7 churches. Each church received the messages of the others, indicating relativity of her situation. Because the Ephesian church also received the message of the others, it means that if today a Ephesian church member is able to revive his or her first love, it means that he's doing well, like the church in Smyrna. If a church member in Laodicea is persecuted because of Christ, then that church member now begins to experience the message to the church in Smyrna. And therefore, that church member of Laodicea can now embrace and listen to the hopeful message to the church in Smyrna. So in short, the messages to the 7 churches were meant for all of them because their situations were not permanent. Their situations could change. And once situations change, then their message also could change. The contemporaneous existence of the 7 churches suggests similar or same privileges and challenges facing contemporary churches. The fact that the 7 churches existed at the same time, experienced different troubles, experienced different privileges, indicates that in our time, we having different churches can have different troubles, different privileges, different blessings, opportunities. And so we should not see ourselves as fulfilling a particular message that was sent to a particular church. The point is that we should not see all the churches in the world today, scattered all over the world, as the church of Laodicea or church of Ephesus. No, we should not see ourselves like that. Each individual may have peculiar situation that others may not have. And so the fact that we have different churches today, the contemporaneous existence of the 7 churches suggests similar or same privileges and challenges facing contemporary churches. We have many churches existing today. And these churches should not be seen as church living the life or the period of the Laodicean church. No, because in the first century, Laodicean church existed with Ephesian church, and Laodicean church had her own problems. Ephesian church had her own problems, privileges, challenges, and so forth. And so, in our time today, we can also have many churches, and these many churches, they can individually have their individual challenges and privileges, and therefore we should not box all the churches into one category of the 7 churches to say that our time is the Laodicean church period. We should allow each church to assess herself, to know the kind of situation that the church finds herself in, and how the messages to the 7 messengers of the 7 churches can be related to that church's situation, and how that church should respond to the message in our situation today. Prophetic line of interpretation of successive periods of Christian history beginning from John's time to the parousia lacks support. This is important. When you look at the 7 seals and 7 trumpets, you can appreciate that when the first seal is broken, the second seal follows, the third seal follows, the 4th seal, and so forth. The same happens with the 7 trumpets. Now, when it comes to the 7 messages to the 7 messengers of the 7 churches, the churches existed at the same time. They did not exist in successive periods. They existed at the same time, and their messages were to be read by all the churches. The 7 messages to the 7 messengers of the 7 churches were relevant for all the 7 churches. Relevant because their situations could change. Now, the traditional interpretation that we have been living different periods of the 7 churches does not seem to address the historical relevance of the messages to the historical churches that existed and lived in the 1st century in Asia Minor. These churches were rare churches. They were not spiritual churches. And therefore, this application, this interpretation of the messages to the 7 messengers or the 7 churches, it does not address the historical relevance of the text. And that will be too much of specialization. Of course, we can apply the messages to ourselves as individual churches, as individual members of the church. And we have seen that these churches existed at the same time, and the messages were given to these 7 churches who were experiencing different experiences, blessings, challenges, opportunities, persecution, different issues, internal problems, external problems. And so we can have churches today that exist at the same time in 21st century, having different situations because of where they live, because of the experiences, and many factors could explain their situation and how they should respond to challenges. So the point is that this way of interpreting the messages has to be looked at again. That's the point. Jesus was selected because Asia Minor province had also churches in Colossae, Hierapolis, Troas, and Miletus. The messages that Jesus sent to the 7 churches were to be shared with the churches in Asia Minor and around the world. Jesus used the number 7 because number 7, according to the Christian account, is perfect, is exhaustive. It takes care of every situation. It's complete. You don't need to add any number. 7 is enough. And that's why Jesus used these 7 churches. And these churches had the rare problems that Jesus addressed. And all the churches surrounding these churches also shared the same problems and had the same privileges as the 7 churches, had in their respective ways. And so that's why Jesus used the number 7. Now, let's look at an important note, idolatry. One of the key items that we discuss, we see from the 7 messages to the 7 messengers of the 7 churches is idolatry, eating food offered to idols. How do we relate to idolatry today? Note this, integral to human needs is to have sense of security. God is the source of human existence, sustenance, and security. the constant and perpetual relationship between God and humans as creator and stewards remains intact. God has made humans stewards, and that's correct. He is our source of existence, source of sustenance and protection. Idolatry is a concept or practice of replacing God as humans recognize any abstract or concrete object as a source of existence, sustenance, and security. How are idols fashioned in our world today? Idols could refer to reverence, recognition for natural elements in heaven, sea, land. 2. Fashioned objects of imaginations by human hands. 3. Human achievements that give sense of existence, sustenance, and security as divine. Owing one's allegiance to Satan in the quest of materialism instead of God is the simplest and naive form of idolatry. Note this point is important. Owing one's allegiance to Satan in the quest of materialism instead of God is the simplest and naive form of idolatry. Now, look at the promises to the 7 churches and their fulfillment. Tree of life, Revelation chapter 2, verse 7. Fulfillment, Revelation chapter 22, verse 4, verse 14, verse 19. Crown of life, Revelation chapter 2, verse 11. Crown of life, Revelation chapter 20, verses 6 and 14. Hidden manna, white stone, we have something corresponding to that, and that's hidden manna or white stone, Revelation chapter 19, verse 19. That is the banquet that Jesus will organize for the saint. Rule with iron rod, Revelation chapter 2, verse 27, Revelation chapter 19, verse 15. White garment, book of life, Revelation chapter 3, verse 5, Revelation chapter 20, verses 12 to 15. Pillar of God's temple, God's name, Revelation chapter 3, verse 12, Revelation chapter 7, verse 15, chapter 11, verse 1, chapter 22, verse 3. Sit down on throne, Revelation chapter 3, verse 21, Revelation chapter 20, verse 4. And so, you see the promises made to the 7 messages of the 7 churches and their fulfillment when Jesus comes. And those who make it to heaven, they are going to enjoy all the 7 promises. This means that the promise that was made to the church in Ephesus, that promise was also for the church member in Smyrna, Pergamon, Sardis, Philadelphia, Laodicea. And the same goes for the other promises, the fulfillment. Because all the saints, as we read in Revelation chapter 20 following, all the saints will enjoy all these promises symbolically. They all point to eternal life. And that is it for our presentation on living the gospel. Revelation chapters 1 to 3. I hope you have enjoyed this presentation. And then in our next presentation, we are going to look at the cost and the character of the gospel. Revelation chapters 4 and 5. Stay tuned and let's finish this seminar. And I believe you're going to be a blessing as we share the word. And if you are yet to be a member, please subscribe so that you can appreciate this seminar and continue to look forward to his coming. Have a nice and a wonderful day. See you.
Promises given to all who believe. Behold, I come quickly, mine own to receive. Hold fast till I come, the danger is great. Sleep not as do others, be watchful and wait. Hold fast till I come, sweet promise of heaven. The kingdom restored to you shall begin. Come enter my joy, sit down on my throne. Bright crowns are in waiting.